Welcome, everybody. Nice to have you here tonight. And thank you, Mark. Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting parents whose children have passed. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. HPH goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. HPH affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at this meeting is voluntary. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Discussions here are confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parent Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Lynn, and welcome everyone. While generally folks come in a few minutes late, so how many of you have not been to a lot of these meetings with me? Let me see your hand. Just wave your physical hand. Okay, so we have a few at least. All right, I'm going to take a moment, and so this will be a review for you regulars. But this is really important. And by the way, those of you, I can't see your faces. If you can enable your video, I'd love to see it. It's great to judge your reaction and so on. So I'm going to just briefly screen share, and we're looking at the website soulproof.com. So I'm going to show you where you get a lot of free resources. So first, I'll be talking about articles. So when I answer questions this evening, I'll say, read this article, read that article. Well, here's where the articles are. Top tab, soulproof.com. And so, for example, here's number 2, When a Child Changes Worlds. One of the first that that I wrote, and I'm actually working on number 137 now. Because several times in the last few weeks I've received the same question from people, and basically they're saying, I was brought up in a very conservative / fundamentalist denomination, and they said if you don't believe certain things or do certain things, you go to hell forever, and that didn't make sense. So then I started searching and found teachings like mine and others that make sense. They said, but now my old friends from the church say I'm going to go to hell because I don't believe the way I used to. And she said, that doesn't make sense. So anyway, there's a lot of that. And so that's going to be number 7, traumatized by fear-based preaching. And then I'm not sure of the subtitle yet. So those are the articles. The next thing is shop. And this is where I'll mention 8 books and everything. All the digital products are free. So here's the 8 books, and I'll refer to the books. For 4 of these, the audio book is free. Here's the Shining Light Parent Speak 1 from the interviews we did. And then 10 audio programs. So this is what the other class I do on Monday night, the first Monday of each month for HPH, we cover a session, like last time we did your life review. And that's one of the questions I'll be asking you tonight. If you don't have questions, is how's it going? Because we've covered a lot of these so far this year, 10 of them. How's it going? What questions you have? What challenges you have? The other thing is the Soul Proof documentary, a 93-minute film that goes over all the evidence that life continues after bodily death and how that information brightens and lightens your earthly experience now. The other thing is radio shows, again, all free. I had 2 different radio shows for a couple years, and these are the best of. The first ones is called The Best Solutions. So some of these people have passed on, Wayne Dyer, Michael Newton, and then others are still around, Brian Weiss. I mean, these are all giants in their fields. And then a more recent group up here. So you know about all those. And finally, the Greater Reality Program. And the full name is Greater Reality Healing, Living, and Helping. This is not to replace helping parents heal in any way, but it's for everything else. Helping parents heal is unsurpassed for help with parents with 1 or more children have passed. But what about all the other, what seem like losses in life, big changes, challenges, bodily death of other family members, including pets, financial losses, disability, all the other things in life. There's a long list. Well, that's why I created this program. And then for each one of the components, there's an article, but then also videos. And for the healing portion, there were a lot of bases to cover. So there's 18 30-minute videos, and we meet twice a month, and you'll see at the top here when we meet and how to join. Yeah, here we are up here, one of the meetings, how to join. So I just wanted to cover those resources really quickly. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask my question first. A few things that popped in through the day. And so one thing is, I realized that one of the more common problems that parents encounter are relationship problems, both relationships with your significant other, but also other family members and friends. And so feel free to ask those questions. Just, it can be embarrassing. And if you don't want to ask it in public, then email me, mark@soulproof.com, and I'll cover it. But just know that it's quite common. It shakes up every part of your life, as you know. And that one included. The other thing, as I mentioned, ask if you have any questions about the audio programs, follow up, problems with them, and so on. So with that, who would like to ask this evening's first question? And Cheryl, just a word of warning, because you're always the first one on, usually get on board like an hour and a half before we start. I would love to hear from you, how you're doing and any questions you have. So hate to put you on the spot, but that's the way we roll here. You are muted. And now you're frozen. Okay. Well, this is called, just so you know, this class is called Ask the Soul Doctor. It's not called Look at the Soul Doctor. That'd be a sad-ass class, wouldn't it? So let's hear from the first question. Questioner.
Well,
Susan.
Cheryl, can you unmute? I asked you to unmute. Can you do?
Okay,
There you
okay,
go.
okay.
All right.
How am I doing? I'm doing all right. It's been 4 years since my son crossed over and 20 for my daughter. And I always kind of strive to be like the shining light parents. They all seem so happy and they've moved on. It's not all of them, but I've just decided that, yes, I'm gonna find some happiness, but I'm never gonna be really happy. And I just know that, so I've come to terms with it. You
Okay.
know, it's just not gonna go away, no matter what I do, but it does help.
So,
I mean,
so you say your son was 4 years and then your daughter
20, 20
1 year.
years.
Yeah.
But they were like, 20 years ago, but they were only, 15 months apart. So she died at 18 or past, whatever you want to call it. And he died at 36.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you've been coming to meetings for what, a couple of years now, and I've definitely seen you look better, look happier, look healthier. And then Lynn, my spy in Phoenix area, reports that you're doing better. So that's good. Yeah, that's a double shot, definitely. That close together. Around year 3, some parents feel like, okay, I'm getting used to this near normal, and then you have another thing. So you have every right to have struggled. Um, but as far as the shining light parents, you say they seem to be doing so well. Well, uh, they will tell you. They'll be the first ones to tell you. And for you more newcomers, we say shining light parents. We're talking about parents that have gone through the dark night of the soul and can mostly focus on the fact that their child is a being of light now, a being of energy, soul, spirit, and is a realm characterized by peace, joy, love, light, etc. And so these parents know that they are a parent of that child. They'll always be the parents, and they aspire to be more love and light like their child, partly because they know that's when they'll best get the best perceptions of their child, and also to honor their child, to create more meaning, so to serve others in the name of their child. So let me, I'll get back to you just in a moment here, Cheryl, but I should have taken a moment to also share this. So if we look at the, oops, where, if we look at the Helping Parents Heal, and this will pop right up, and I type H, and there it is. The videos, and Lynn and I went through these, or set these up. If you go to YouTube videos, top tab at Helping Parents Heal, then the first one says affiliate leader / caring listener interviews. And here's Beauty and the Beast. And here are the 130 Shining Light parents. Some of them are group leaders, affiliate leaders. Some of them are caring listeners. Some are both. And then the best of their what they had to say is in that book, Shining Light Parents Speak. So for those of you who want to know what can you learn from these shining light parents, how did they focus on the positive more, focus on gratitude for the time they had their children, etc., that's how you learn about it. You can watch these videos and you can read the book. Okay, with that, so where do we go from there, Cheryl? What specific question do you have?
I've watched them, the videos, and, they're very uplifting. I really enjoy them, and I've also have the book. But I just, during the day, sometimes like my mind just goes into that place.
Sure.
And I'll watch a movie and it'll remind me of things, and it just I can't see me ever just being, I'll never be the same. But I do think it has affected me. I mean, I'd love to do more with this group, but I kind of procrastinate. I don't think I'm quite ready yet. I'd like to help out the group. It's really saved me, totally. And maybe in a year or two, I can do more. And maybe the more I help people, I have tried to invite people to Helping Parents Heal meetings, but some of them just, they're not ready or whatever.
Right.
But I have tried, and I'm trying not to listen to people that I know that haven't lost a child, because they always say such hurtful things to me. I mean, they don't mean to. I know
Right.
they don't mean to, and I probably was the same way.
Give me an example, Cheryl, of something they say that's hurtful to you.
Um, there's so many. Well, either, a lot of times now they won't say anything, but at all. And I do have a few friends that talk about my kids. They were friends of my kids. And I kind of hang out with them because they were friends of my kids, even though they're a lot younger than me. But what's an example? Let's see. Oh, I have a friend in Florida, and she's like, I'm talking to her, and she's like very religious, and she studies the Bible a lot, goes to Bible study. And I started talking to her a little bit about mediums, and she said, don't tell me you're talking to the dead.
Right. I gotcha. Okay. Yeah,
And
that's a
she
good,
laughed. And she laughed.
yeah, that's a good example. So, and for those more of you newcomers, HPH is not religiously affiliated at all, but it does come up. And so I've written, well, this new article is going to help, you know, where you're traumatized. Also, article, I will find it, number 83, Am I a Christian? So you can be a Christian and not believe in hell. I've had parents, numerous parents, whose kids passed by suicide. They were told by their minister or people in their church, well, you know your son's going to hell because he chose suicide. And I'm like, well, there's some real religious loving support, right? Just in the Spirit of God. So yeah, there's all kind of beliefs. And that one, the dead know nothing, that's like 4 words from, I think it's Ecclesiastics, which is a chapter in the Old Testament. And Solomon was actually saying that cynically. He was saying, uh, unbelievers believe the dead know nothing, but in fact, they are with God now. Well, so out of this ignorance, um, those 4 words were cherry picked out of there. The dead know nothing. And so there are whole denominations that believe, yeah, when you die, you're in the ground forever. Well, we have just so much evidence now that shows that's not true. So thank you for bringing that up. And one of the points is, yeah, when somebody comes up with something you don't agree with or offends you, just try not to take it personally and just don't be around that person so much. I want to share one other thing, and thank you so much for talking with us tonight, Cheryl. And I hope you will more in the future. And that is, I will serve other people. I'll reach out and volunteer when I feel better. And I understand it, but that's kind of like saying to a fireplace, if you give me some heat, I'll put wood in there. So in other words, what many parents have found out is if they'll start serving others, if they'll get out and do something, volunteer in any way, that's when they start feeling better. So I wouldn't wait till you feel like you're ready. And, you know, ask Lynn and Elizabeth, you live in the hotbed of HPH, ask others, hey, where do you know where I can volunteer? And then just do a few hours a week and see if I'm not right, that you'll get at least 10 times more out of it than anybody you're helping.
Yeah, I was talking to I have a therapist, but I don't see her anymore because she moved. But I was telling her, well, I'd like to work with dogs because I love dogs so much, and my kids love dogs. We've always had dogs. I have
Yep.
my son's dog here, and but I said, but I don't know if I'm ready, and then I get really sad when I
Well,
see
see
them.
that
And
yeah,
she said,
yeah.
No, there's always gonna be sad things when you see dogs in a, shelter. But you're not helping them by not doing anything.
Yeah, I agree with her. Listen to her, listen to me. Well, thank you for sharing. We're going to move on to somebody else, but and for all of you, my email, mark@soulproof.com. If you have questions, shoot me an email and I'll give you specific feedback there. All right, Susan, I think you are up next, please, dear.
Thank you. And thank you so much for doing these meetings. I really appreciate your time and all of that, and your expertise. And that is one of my questions, wants to draw on that expertise. My son passed a year and a half ago, and I've come a really long way since then. And my sister has always been very spiritual, and I've had a couple of events. One was a dream visit the night he passed from him that I had never heard of signs, but I knew immediately that was him.
Mm-hmm.
And then with my sister's help, being attuned more to the whole larger picture, that helped me and opened me up to all of this. But and so I'm originally from Germany, and she still lives there, and so she's very well connected with the spiritual community over there, and she does all kinds of seminars and workshops and stuff. And multiple people have told her that she respects, just like I respect you because of how how I've seen you talk and all of that. And several people have told her that my son was somehow stuck. And I've brought this up at different times, and everybody's, God, no, that there is no such thing. There is no such thing as being stuck. But yet she also talks to experts, so I'm not sure. I don't know who's right. They
Sure.
all,
Well, thank you for the question. Here's what the clinical evidence indicates, that not all souls go into the light upon bodily death for a number of reasons. Some souls will stick around because they're concerned about their loved ones, and they want to try to comfort their loved ones and be present for a while. Some souls are afraid to go into the afterlife if they believe that they might be going into a hellish existence, or if they don't believe there's an afterlife. We've had cases of like near-death experiences. A person who's a total atheist said, well, initially I saw nothing because I thought there was nothing. And so there was just nothing. But then after a while, I kind of opened one eye and said, well, what are those lights moving around out there? And then that's when they, moved into the light. Some people have addictions, and I'm not saying any of these have to do with your child.
No.
That can be alcohol, drugs, golf, sex, materialism, etc. So they don't want to leave Earth because they're not sure they can get their fix somewhere else. And then also, some souls will move into the light, but they're not ready right off the bat for being in the flow with their soul group and all that. And they're not so easily contact because they need a period of rest, rehabilitation, counseling, and so on. So those are all reasons why some people might have picked up that he's stuck. But keep in mind that, I work a lot on the Soul Phone Project with Dr. Gary Schwartz, former professor at Harvard, Yale, and University of Arizona. And he did the first scientific research on mediums, as described in his book, The Afterlife Experiments. And so he found that the very best mediums are only right about 75% of the time. And then some mediums are total frauds, or they're real general. So the point is, you have to watch who you listen to, because they can be pretty mediocre and they can be just plain wrong. So if whatever the case is, and keep in mind, what'd you say, a year and a half?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Earth time and soul time are different. So year and a half in Earth time may not be that long in spirit time, but just send prayers and ask others to do the same. See him in the light and know that he is surrounded by angels, guides, master teachers. He is loved. He is not punished. He is not judged harshly. He's totally understood and supported. And when it, have you, so you say you've gotten some signs from him?
Oh, plenty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And remarkable signs, not like where I had to, this is a feather, like stuff that there's no doubt. Like,
All right. So
yeah,
if he's, yeah, if he's stuck, how's he sending such
I know,
great
that doesn't
signs?
make sense.
Yeah,
No, I know. That's why I'm like, to me, it doesn't sit right. But because she has such respect for them, I don't want to dismiss that, and I'm sure he's even in their opinion, he is certainly where he should be now, but it concerned me a lot in the beginning,
sure.
because like, where is he?
Well, being from Germany, do you know the saying, take it with a grain of salt?
Mm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what I do. And have you used, dear, my afterlife contact technique?
Yeah.
Does it?
And I have made
Yeah,
contact with him too. Yeah. I have no doubt he's fine. I just wanted someone like you to, who has all the different perspectives to chime in on that, if that's even a possibility. And none of these things, I mean, I can't, of course, I don't know for sure certain things, but I know he had no addiction. He Dr. Sue Frederick, she confirmed twice that he completed his mission here. So there was no need to still hang
right,
around for
right.
certain things. So to me, it never sat right with me when
Good.
she said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, another saying is the proof is in the pudding. So the fact that he's coming through clearly is just by logic, that he's not stuck. Because if he were stuck, he wouldn't be able to come through like that. So yeah, I wouldn't. Um, and what you might use is a holistic breathing technique. I don't know if you've used this, described in article number 70, and it's one of the audio programs, holistic breathing technique. And that would be a way you can set an intention just before you do it and say, thank you for helping me release any residual fears or worries about him being stuck. Because there are different levels of knowing. So intellectually, you can say, well, there's no way he's stuck. But there still can be kind of those gnawing worries within. And that breathing will help you release those and get clear from it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions on that.
Will do. Thanks.
All right, Liza, you're up next, dear.
Hello.
Hello.
More along the lines of what Cheryl was talking about. It will be 2 years since my son Lucas passed. And I've always been, since I was a little girl, I was raised Catholic. I'm a Christian who doesn't believe in hell, by the way. I never really did. But I'm finding it harder and harder to relate to people these days who aren't parents like myself. I love the Helping Parents Heal community, and I just love spiritual people in general. And I feel like I'm at a point now where that's all I really want to talk about. And yes, I do the small talk. I have a 15-year-old daughter, so who's very involved in school, so I have to do a lot of small talk with parents, and I feel like I have to put on a brave face a lot, and sometimes I really don't want to, but I do. And I do want to feel good, but at the same time, the small talk just gets a little lonely. It's without when I'm not talking with another parent who has been in my shoes or just a spiritual person in general, I find the conversations to be very surface. And I guess
Yep.
that's just the kind of life that I'm living now. And I think that I'll attract more and more people who are like-minded. And I'm hoping. And kind of like Cheryl, I live with this sense of I'm in one place, I'm with my son on one level, and then I'm here. And I'm
Yep.
not quite all here. So, and that's just how it's going to be for me. That's how I feel. I feel this is just how I'm always going to be searching for something deeper, something um, that will resonate with my heart and my soul a little bit more. So,
Great stuff. A few comments. First of all, you've heard of shaman. When I was a kid, I heard the saying, know you're of this, know you're in this world, but not solely of this world. And I thought, well, that's an important distinction. And so that's what a shaman or a spiritual master or enlightened being is. They have one foot on earth, but then they have next in eternity. And they know that they're beings of both simultaneously. And that's when life really gets interesting because you're free. Secondly, on relationships, I wrote article number 66, Relationships for More Evolved People. 66, and I shared in there a couple paragraphs of places that I've found over the years where more advanced souls tend to frequent because, you're the superficial, just doesn't do it anymore. Your spiritual eyes open. And then, of course, HPH, so many people in that group and reach out, in your community, you have a local group.
Yes.
Okay. So there are a couple ways to meet more people. And I loved what you said in the beginning. I'm a Christian who doesn't believe in hell. Actually, the statistics are that the great majority of Christian denominations do not believe in a fiery eternal hell. However, it's that small fraction who are so vocal and they scare the hell out of people. I mean,
that's it. That's
you don't,
exactly it.
you don't have this thing, but sometimes like men go into a urinal, stand up and pee, and these fundamentalists will put pamphlets on top of the urinal. So there you're standing there, you're seeing, are you going to hell? And so that's one reason I bring it up and talk about it. Dr. Raymond Moody, who I respect so much, he first used the word, I heard 25 years ago, he calls them fundamentalists. So it's like they have funny thinking. But again, they get a lot of press because, fear sells. So you are doing so well, and I'm always so proud of how you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Well, vice versa, and thanks for sharing so others can learn from it.
Thank you.
All right, Maria, you're up next.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, super.
So today marks 7 months since Andrew's transition, and in this journey, I'm finding that you are a different person. You're no longer the same person, and I'm okay with that as I grow and develop and I connect, with more the spiritual life and know that he's okay and he's sending me signs, which is great. But I'm also sensing that in real time, the dynamics of people's and then the relationship with your inner circle has also shifted and changed because some people will contact you. I have a good friend who called me and just checked on me and to see how I was doing, etc. But then there's some people that pull away, don't want to talk about it, and there's an absence there. And I've just accepted that it is what it is. I'm not focused on that, but it's just interesting that not only you're changing, but your inner circle is changing. So
Right.
some people come and go in your life. I'm also wondering, and I appreciate the subject matter with relationships, is that what do they do on the other side? Like what is Andrew doing? And that's something that has been swirling in my head for the last couple of weeks, and I'm like, does everybody have a different role? Does everybody gravitate to do something that they're assigned or they want to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, on the first part about relationships, really important for all of you to not take it personally when other people don't know what to say or
Mhm.
don't say anything or say things that are rude or ignorant. We'll say, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're doing their best. I mean, I went to theology school, and I was shocked at how little pastoral counseling was offered. And so then I realized all these poor ministers, they're expected to have the answers to everything, but they're not trained for that. So they're like doing their best. So they say, well, your child's in a better place. And I mean, I've heard so many. In fact, it's almost funny if you look at it in the right way. Like some ministers will say, well, God wanted your child to be with him. And the parents are rightfully angry. Oh, really? God, the creator of all that exists, wanted my child, so took it? It's just so schizoid. But, they're doing their best. So, Lynn and others, I'm blessed to know so many amazing Helping Parents Heal leaders, and they have found so many of them that, yeah, their group of friends, for the most part, changes over the years, and it's really a beautiful way to upgrade the people you hang out with. So as far as Andrew, and happy 7-month anniversary, Andrew, what'd you say he's around 40 when he passed?
42.
Okay, so question of his relationships, what he's doing, the answer is whatever he wants. Did you ever see the movie? It was with Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr. It's called What Dreams May Come.
I have.
Yeah, they do such a good job of showing that heaven is afterlife. It's not a static place. It's not one size fits all. And it's very much a manifestation of our consciousness, just like it is here on earth, but even more so in the next realm. And so basically he can do whatever he wants. If he likes to hike or be by the ocean, he likes to play sports, he wants to study, he can do everything. And on multiple levels. I wrote article number 25, I'm going by memory, about multi-location.
Okay.
Yeah, 75.
70.
And also called parallel realities, a simultaneous experience at 75. And so humans have this, we've talked about this, only about 40% of our energy is needed to manifest this earthly experience. Well, those in the next realm of life who aren't encumbered by the human brain that thinks it knows everything but hardly perceives anything. So he probably can do 20 things at once. And from what you've told me in the past about him, he probably is taking full advantage of that. You can imagine how cool that is. And then relationships, sure, they can have, well, let's just talk about sex, because that comes to mind. And so the question that has been asked, and we're talking about life between lives, Michael Newton's work and others, through mediums, through near-death experiences, they say, is there sex in the afterlife? And the answer is yes, and 1,000 times better than it was on Earth. So I'm like, that sounds like a good deal. So, and they said you can make love in a way like on Earth, but that's kind of primitive and crude compared to what's possible, which is like this dance of energy and beautiful lights. So he's having the time of his life, and he wants you to do the same. And for 7 months, I take my hat off to you. You are doing so well.
Thank you.
Anything else on that?
No, I mean, signs have been coming in, especially his initials, his name. I just flew back I'm in Jersey, so I flew back. I was traveling, and at the airport, this man comes in, I need reservations, or I need to change my reservations, and twice, Andrew. So I knew he was there with me.
I love it.
And I think just paying attention to these signs and that it resonates, and that, and then acknowledging them for me.
Your flowers make me want to share something really quick. I saw those last time, and so I'll just screen share real quick. A friend of us sent this flower. It's called a Cereus, Cereus, and it's also called Queen of the Night. It's in the cactus family, and
Oh,
it only blooms for one day. I mean, look at that flower. And I thought how much it reminds me of an earthly incarnation. You know, this time on earth is a blink of an eye in the span of eternity. And so we prepare and grow, and then boom, we bloom, and then we move to the next phase of life. So I just think it's such a beautiful metaphor for this earthly visit we're having.
it is.
Well,
Thank you
always,
much.
always an honor. Yeah. Allie, you're up next, please.
Hello, Doctor.
Hello.
Mark, how are you?
Super.
Good, good. My son passed in November 2023. So we're coming up on 2 years. I really miss him. But I have been having a lot of physical issues, right? Just from the get-go. And I just need some advice on how long it's gonna take for everything to go out. I am very into yoga and I try to do that several times a week. I'm active, but I have had so many issues from headaches to canker sores in my mouth, to plantar fasciitis, just a lot of
Yep.
issues.
Yep. And so do a lot of people, and they don't talk about
Hmm.
it. And here's why.
Hmm.
You know, that's such a severe shock. It's a physiological trauma. And the two organ systems, well, three, that are
Hmm.
the most sensitive to that level of trauma are the nervous system, which, you know, controls and coordinates all the functions of the body. Also, the endocrine system, your thyroid gland, your ovaries, your adrenal glands, the stress glands, and then
Hmm.
the gastrointestinal systems. And so it's totally understandable that you're combating a series of symptoms. And that doesn't mean you're getting diseases or you're falling apart. That's your body's way of talking to you. Your body can't speak English, so it speaks in symptoms. And so a naturally oriented physician who understands the body's language will be able to say, well, that tells me this, this, and this, you know, and here's what we need to work on. So I recommend my book, which is called Radiant Wellness, and the audiobook and the ebook are free under shop at soulproof.com. Radiant Wellness. Also articles number 12 and 32. 32 talks about natural healing approaches. So there's two basic areas here that need to be covered. And the first is self-care. And that's what I talk about in Radiant Wellness. In other words, you need to eat healthily, take whole food supplements, get your rest, exercise. So those are things you do. And then next is to have a natural healthcare team, and as well as your medical doctor. And then that way they can help you, your body heal itself. So you're young enough, you'll be able to turn this around and even reach a higher level of health than before. So the natural healthcare, I'm sorry, is article number
Hmm.
87. But then also the most powerful approach, you know,
Hmm.
I helped people for 53 years in different ways. If I could only have one tool from everything I used all those years, it would be what's called nutrition-based healing. And I talk about that in article number 32. So look those over. And then if you have questions,
Okay.
email me, mark@soulproof.com, and I'll make some specific suggestions for you so we can get you tuned up. Because number one, you deserve to feel happy and whole and good. And number two, the
Hmm.
world needs your light, your special gifts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And is acupuncture a good possibility?
Acupuncture is excellent. My
Okay.
fiance of 20 years is a doctor of acupuncture, so I'm
Okay.
very well aware of how powerful it is. And that's in article number 87, where I talk
Yes.
about chiropractic, deep tissue massage, acupuncture, nutrition-based healing are the four big natural healthcare approaches, as well as having an integrative medical doctor who recognizes when is it needed to have drugs and surgery, which is not very often, and when will more natural measures suffice.
All right. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Yen, you are up next, dear.
Hi, Dr. Mark.
Hello.
Thanks for doing this for HPH group. And I've been in my journey for 3 years and 3 months, and I lost my only child, and she was only 21 months old. And I'm from Vietnam, so the culture is really different there. So my mom and like I didn't grow up with my dad, so my mom is the only parent, like single parents. But during my journey, she doesn't understand, and the way that she telling me how to live just breaking my heart, because she told me that, oh, you shouldn't talk about her, let her rest. So she's in the better place. And if you keep talking about her, if you keep being sad, you won't help her soul. And it's not the first time she telling me that. When my daughter first passed, I went back to my country, and I stayed there with my mom for a month, but I didn't find any peace with her surrounding because she's not helpful. So when I cry, she told me to stop, because if I cry, I'm going to stop my daughter from, being sad or worry about me. And then I already make my statement that, Mom, don't tell me what to do, because you never lost a child, so you don't understand my feelings, and I will talk about her forever. And she heard me loud and clear, but she still, like, every time if I send a picture to the family that I say, oh, you know what, today Mia should have been 5 years old, and then she telling me, oh, you shouldn't talk about her, let her rest. And I don't know how to deal with my
Right.
mom.
Well,
And
yeah, I understand. So first of all, you're probably not going to change your mom. How old is she?
she's 75.
Yeah, you're probably not going to change how she thinks and what she believes. So what I recommend is just say, thank you, Mom. Yeah, I love you so much. I'm so thankful to have such a great mom. In other words, honor her as your earthly mother, but realize that she's not looking in accurate ways. In other words, in the past, there are all kinds of beliefs, and some of them were superstitious, and some of them were fear-based. Well, now we have scientific and clinical evidence about how really the afterlife works. And the facts are that your daughter is not adversely affected by your crying and sadness, because again, she's in this world where she can see the big picture of life. She knows it's all God. She knows there's angels. She knows that no one really dies. She knows she'll see you again fully someday. And she knows there's a rhyme and a reason for why she passed at such a young age. Oftentimes, when a little one passes right after birth in the first few years, they're advanced souls who didn't need to have an earthly incarnation. She didn't need to go to earth school. She just came here for a while to wake up people, doctors, nurses, family members, friends, to make a huge impact in 21 months that most people don't make if they live to 100 years. So you don't have to worry about her at all. So you just cry all you want and you talk about her, and she's cheering you on and rooting you on, and she understands. She's sending you love. There's a good chance she's one of your teachers, that she's helping you. So use, first of all, are you working with a caring listener?
I am a co-leader of one of the group from HPH, like the infant and toddler group.
Mm-hmm.
And helping parents here has been helping me
Yeah.
dramatically. So I kind of paying forward by helping the
Good.
Vietnam parents in Vietnam, because the culture is so different, and people like suffer
Sure.
by losing a child and also suffering by the relationship surrounding them because they don't let them talk, they don't let them honor their kid. And I try to do my best, but I just feel hopeless. Like my mom, she's the one who gave birth me, but
Right.
she's the one
Yep.
who stopped me from the
What?
grieving process. And
Yeah,
it's
well,
just so, yeah.
okay, yeah, we covered that. So we're talking about you now. So if you go to the helpingparentsheal.org website, at the top right, you'll see a top tab that says Caring Listeners. And click on that. There's 35. And Lynn, the moderator of this group, and I oversee them also. And just scan down through and see who stands out that you can talk with, because they do this for free. They're not trained therapists, but they'll listen, they'll share what worked for them, they'll suggest resources. So number one, get a caring listener. And then number two, read article number 9 at soulproof.com, and then use my afterlife contact technique and start communicating with your daughter more. And don't expect to hear a 21-month-old. In other words, she's not going to say goo goo and gaga. She's going to say, Mom, it's wonderful to be interacting with you, because even though she's only 21 months on earth, she's an eternal soul like all of us. So you'll get to meet your real daughter. Now, she may appear to you in the beginning like you remember her till you can get used to that, but you'll get to meet your real daughter, and you'll understand why it is that she was only here for such a short while. So go ahead and start with those things, and then email me, because I understand with your cross-cultural challenges, you may need a little extra help, and I'll be glad to answer any questions, okay?
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Take care.
thank you. Thank you.
Wendy, you are up next, please.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I actually have a lot of questions, but I will really only have one comment and one question. My comment is, my son died. He transitioned 4 years ago. And Roni was, of course, a very important person in my life. So it was very difficult for me at first. But what I found that was helpful was making a transition myself into more of a spiritual person, but also into finding a way to make his life have meaning to a lot of different people. And that really helped. But my
Good.
question is, do you have any materials or articles or anything on the soul, just generally? How would you define the soul? You know, how will the soul, you started to talk about it with the last woman. How would the soul interact with us? You know, and just more information about, I mean, I've asked several people what would be their definition of a soul, and I'm just trying to get a sense of how different people perceive a soul.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's a great question. And actually, to cover that base would take a few um, articles. And the first one would be, because keep in mind that we all are souls right now. And others, not someday we'll be a soul. We are souls right now. And that's why
Right.
when I write and speak, sometimes I'll say people/souls, because we're both. So the first thing would be to read article number 15, which is about the nature of humans, which is we have that dual consciousness. The second would be the, yeah, that's a really good question, would be to understand the afterlife more, because the more you understand the afterlife, the more you understand what souls are and what they do. And so that's article number 107. What is the afterlife really like? And let me go to, I have so many articles, it takes me a little while now to find them sometimes. The other thing is I would focus because there's some good evidence that so many of your kids are more advanced souls, partly because they passed on early. And so article number 117 is, are you a more advanced soul? That would be a good one. Article number 118, who and what are you really? That definitely talks about the
Okay.
topic you're asking. And then also 128, soulmates. So I would say if you read those 5, you're going to have a really good sense that answer your question. And then if you have any other specific questions beyond that, you know how to get hold of me.
Thank you very much. Well, I have a good relationship with Roni now. I do have visitations, and
Good.
I know about like Suzanne Giesman and, all the work she's doing and all of that. But I wanted to get your perspective. So thank
Sure.
you very much.
Well, you're welcome. We actually have a few minutes and no one else has a hand up. Did you want to ask a second question?
Let me see.
And
Of course,
I'm
my
enjoying
mind
your
has gone blank.
butterflies, by the way, while you think.
Okay. I guess my question, and I don't know, it might be in one of these articles, but I find it difficult to be able to know when it's a sign from my son or if it's in my imagination. And I do understand that it really doesn't matter because it makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is the right place to ask that, but are there ways that we can feel more assured that it is contact with our loved one?
That's an excellent question, and it's a very common one. I trained 27 years ago with Brian Weiss, MD, to do past life regressions. And he said it is very common for clients to feel like this could be my imagination. I could be making this up, even when their past life regression experience was validated. In other words, a woman comes to him, she's 27, she's never traveled outside the US, and during a regression, she sees that she was a woman living in France in this town who died on this date, had this many children, and research was done and found that a woman of that name, all those details did exist in the historical record. So that's what I mean by validation. But even so, she felt like it could be her imagination. So the first thing to know, it's very common. Second thing is to, with practice, practice makes perfect. And so use, for example, my afterlife contact technique.
Okay.
And that's described in article number 9, afterlife contact technique under the shop.
Thank
And
you.
so the more you do it, the more you'll get a sense of, no, that's my monkey mind. That's what mediums call it. In other words, are they really channeling through a person of the past, or are they tapping to their monkey mind? And you'll get a sense of that. Another thing is, the in the Bible it says, "You shall know a tree by its fruits," and so the an actual contact, whether awake or during dream time, often gives the person afterwards a sense of peace, a deeper knowing that there really was a visit. And so if you have those kind of feelings afterwards, it looks like you are,
Yes.
then that's another sign. And the last
Okay.
thing I would say about that is that, and I do have an article on discernment, and that's basically what we're talking about here. Article number 20, discerning your inner wisdom. And so there are signs of discernment, but basically, if it's your brain, it's going to kind of go on and on.
Right.
Whereas if it's of spirit, it'll be short and sweet. To the point, it'll come in before your brain starts up its analysis. So there's some ways
Yes.
to start.
Yeah. Isn't that
Make sense?
amazing?
Yeah.
And, that's what makes me oftentimes realize that it is a real connection,
Yep.
because I'm usually, well, I don't mean this poorly, but godsmacked when it happens. And I'm usually like, wow, and I'm in such a euphoric state that, it's
Yeah,
a
well,
moment.
if one person has an experience, they doubt their
Yeah.
sanity. But when you know that millions and millions, in other words, this falls in the category of what are called after-death communications. And
Mhm.
Raymond Moody, again, his statistic was that about 75% of parents report one or more meaningful after-death communications.
Mhm.
Well, when I speak to groups of parents, and I've done this with thousands of parents, I say, how many of you have had one or more meaningful? Almost every hand goes up.
Yes.
So yeah, so hopefully we're making that shift from, I can't
Mhm.
believe I got a visit, to, yeah, it's not that
Mhm.
big of a deal because they're right here beside us,
Right,
our
right.
loved ones.
Do you have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay, quick one. My brother-in-law died recently, and I was able to connect with him pretty easily. But at first, with my son, I was grieving so much. I still connected with him, but it was my sister and my niece said that they were able to, be with Roni, my son.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Ah,
true? When we're grieving, it's harder to connect?
it can be, and it has to do with energies. If you see article number 108, which is called Higher Energy Emotions and Ways of Being. So if you're stuck in sadness, and if there's any kind of guilt, like I should have done more, or should
Sure.
see it coming, anger toward God,
Mhm.
those are all lower energy emotions. Whereas
Mhm.
your daughter's on this higher energy plane, so
Mhm.
it's like you're on a different radio station than the one you want to
Mhm.
hear. And
Mhm.
that's why the more you can focus on peace, joy, love, gratitude, the
Mhm.
more you connect.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to share quickly, I am a therapist and I appreciate all the work that you do in helping people. This is a really wonderful thing you do.
It's one of the most special and important parts of my life. And I have a feeling you and I could just talk for hours.
I know, me too.
Yeah, and with all of you. So
Oh,
again, helping parents heal, we're here for you. Check out those resources I shared. And if you have any questions, you have any problems, mark@soulproof.com. We'll get you the help you need. And then you become a shining light parent yourself, and let it shine. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. See you next time. Love you guys.
Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
thank
Thanks.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Good
Bye.
night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you,
See you soon, Cheryl.
Yeah, we got Cheryl to talk. That was a big night.
Ann. That's good.
All
He
right.
called on me.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good
Bye,
night.
everybody. Love you guys.
Love you too. I don't know how to turn this off. Let me figure it out.